My name is Brian Mangilog. I take he, him, his pronouns. So I am involved with a lot of PhilAm work around here. I'm also involved with NAFA and their EPIC program. And then just regionally, just in the area, I'm involved with PAMANA and their high school leadership workshop, things like that. Just other random PhilAm organizations and events that I like to get involved with.
Hi, so my name is Geneva, and I am currently a senior at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I am from the island of Kauai, and I am studying for a BS in psychology and biology with a emphasis in pre-med. So I am going to be applying to medical school after graduating. I am currently the president of the Atherton YMCA here in Manoa, along with Psi Sigma, which is a psychology connection organization at Manoa as well. And I'm just in other organizations that like to promote mental health and the well-being of minority students along with females in STEM.
And last but not least, my name is Chachie. I just graduated with my BA in psychology and BA in Ilocano studies. And I am currently working on just being on a gap year, focusing on grad application, and in hopes of creating a children's book in the next coming year. So let's get onto it. I know that this is a lunch break type of episode, so if you have anything to eat, feel free to eat on camera, no worries. And I brought with me lumpia that my sister and I just baked before this. So yeah, feel free if you guys wanted to share your dish, you can as well. But then the next question that I would like to ask is, what how did your mental health journey begin, and why is it important to you now?
Well, I'm just sipping on some green tea where it's 7 o'clock here in Boston. So I'm between dinner and between New Year's dinner. But to talk about, I guess, my mental health journey, I think my first experience with it started in high school, especially specifically my junior year. I was on the varsity wrestling team, so I was cutting weight. I had a lot of the physical kind of fatigue already, and then I was just going through the stress of school and then applying to colleges, and I was also kind of in a stressful relationship at the time. So that's kind of my first experience with mental health and having to really reflect on why do I feel this way mentally and physically? How can I get better? And then it wasn't really until college that I kind of talked about this with other people. When I was in school, there was a big movement around Asian American mental health overall. Organizations that I was in kind of organized events around that. Unfortunately, there was someone that was going to be my graduating my year took his own life, and there was a documentary developed out of that called Looking for Luke. And so there are a lot of events surrounding that and campaigns for increasing just the issues around mental health in the Asian American community. Also, that was something I really was a part of, and kind of part of my own mental health journey and opening up to other people and opening up to other Asian Americans, and then of course to other Filipino Americans in the area as well. And right now it's just a matter of how I want to help open up the conversation, make sure that people younger than me, especially those in high school and still in college, are comfortable with opening up around mental health and really know how to talk about it, or what is an issue, quote unquote, in our like Filipino American community, that we can just deal with by talking to each other about, kind of just putting a spotlight on. I especially just in the time of all the social media, and I feel like there's more campaigns for advocating for mental health awareness, just make sure that all of those resources and all of those opportunities are available for anyone that I know might need it.
Yeah, so my journey with mental health, I feel like started at a really young age. I had a lot of friends that would come to me for advice initially. So even when I was in elementary, middle school, I didn't really see it as mental health, but more like advice and therapeutic speaking with my friends. And then in high school, my senior year, I took AP psychology, and that's when I really honed down on what it meant to have good mental health well-being, along with what these different psychological problems may be. And I, like most pre-med students, was just going to major in biology, and then I realized I wanted my major to really be psychology, especially with the rise in suicide and mental health problems. I thought it was really important to understand that aspect of people in order to really treat others holistically and understand where they're coming from depending on their backgrounds, whether they're from a disadvantaged background, a minority background, or an immigrant background. I know full well how it's like to come from all those different backgrounds. And I felt like understanding what normal health and how that applies to how your physicality will also be based on how your psyche is really important. And yeah, so that's why right now I'm working on establishing these different programs with the YMCA. We realize that mental health is a really heavy topic, especially for college students. Although we are adults, some of us either number one don't want to talk about mental health, or number two, we don't know how to. And so we are coming up with programs that are more engaged on what everyone's been doing during the quarantine, some hobbies that they've developed, and sharing it with other peers, or just having a social circle where you can talk to others, like a kind of a coffee hour where if you just want to stop by and talk to other people for that engagement, for just to talk to other people, you can also do that as well. I'm also a resident assistant at the dorms, so I've seen a lot of people who struggle with being away from home for the first time and not knowing how to deal with just being on their own, not having their parents around, or not knowing how to do laundry. Some of these simple things that we don't really think about actually makes learning harder, and having a conducive environment isn't something that you can provide to people without understanding what their background is and how you can better help them with the experiences that you have acquired on the way of college, or just living in in the society that you live in right now. So yeah, specifically, so I want to be a pediatrician, and I'm just trying to find different ways to bring about that conversation without it being so heavy, and letting children understand that it's totally okay to talk about what their feelings are, and that everyone has their ups and downs, but at the end of the day, it's totally okay to talk to people about it.
Thank you both for sharing that. And I think one thing about when we talk about mental health is the first thing that we kind of like need to address first is what are some of the biggest barriers you see in this generation that kind of address before we kind of tackle mental health, because we know that mental health itself is so much, and we see that through social media, and we see that there are some like cultural values that kind of intertwine that says it's not like it's still it's getting there, it's getting okay, like it's we're talking about it within our community. But do you think that there's still some barriers that needs to be broken in order for it which is mental health to be fully kind of taught more within families, especially with our children?
I feel like you're right that within our generation, the conversation really is opening up. I think a big first step is that we need to continue uh, validating our generation as well about mental health. I think one thing, at least for me, I am second generation. My parents are immigrants, and I feel like something that's common for all children of immigrants, not just Filipino Americans, but our parents really come from this idea of surviving, adapting to the culture, to the country, that the values have really been instilled of like keeping your head down, hard work will solve everything. But unfortunately, I think all three of us know that that's not always the case. It's really a matter of switching the mindset from just surviving to thriving. Like, we shouldn't just be trying to get by here. Like, we're fortunate enough that our parents have already really placed roots here. We have relatively good lives here, and it's a matter of making sure that we're okay, no matter where any issues are. Like, everyone has their own things going on. It doesn't matter that we didn't fly on our own to a new country and had to build up our houses from our own work. What's going on with us is valid. Our mental health matters. So I think making sure that we instill that belief within our generation is definitely a first step to making sure that then it can spread from there. And then in terms of just speaking to your families about it, I think one thing that I was guilty of was I actually probably underestimated my parents' ability to think about it, to talk about it. Of course, there are families out there where mental health is very hard to talk about and kids may get shut down. But at least for me, especially in school, I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I really just had a lot of times where school was just hard. I didn't think I belonged there. So many successful people around me just seemed to have it sorted out. I was going to be engineering, and I switched over to neurobio, and really still wasn't sure of what I was doing. And it really just took a matter of me calling up my parents, telling them that school was stressing me out, that I wasn't handling the workload well, that I just needed some change. And although, of course, they didn't really know how to respond, but they at least listened to me. And I think that's definitely a first step. I think, again, I just let them know that mental health matters and it can affect anybody.
From what Ryan also brought up, I feel like it may be hard for second generation Filipino Americans to bring up their mental well-being, especially if their families escaped from a really, I've spoken to people, a lot of my fellow friends that are Filipinos that have immigrant parents, a lot of them say like, your life is much better here. Back in the Philippines, like I have to cross the river to go to school and like all of these different things, which I know are totally true. They're definitely not making it up at all. And I get that. I definitely get that. I know that my life here is so much easier than it was in the Philippines, but it's just like in every different place, there's a lot of different problems that you'll find on the way. And especially with the rise of social media and like Ryan said, imposter syndrome, you feel like you don't belong, even though you were born here. Maybe you weren't born here and you speak the language, you still aren't looked at in the same light, and you have to work so much harder than everyone else, and it's not fair. So that really boggles down on your mental well-being, and it's hard to talk to someone that understands. So I think especially what I tell my friends or children that go through these things is that they don't necessarily have to talk to their parents about it. They don't have to even talk to an adult about it. They can talk to their peers. They can talk to a counselor, a teacher that they trust, a mailman, whoever they feel like they can talk to and release all this stress inside of them. They should definitely go for it. And if it gets really tough, maybe you can ask your friend or teacher to help bring that up to your parents, maybe at a parent teacher conference or whatnot, just because I feel like it's hard to bottle everything up. And sometimes you feel like you can only talk to your parents about it, or it's something that only you deal with. But in reality, a lot of people deal with it. And it's not just minority students or immigrant families, it's everybody. Everyone deals with mental health problems just because of the society that we live in. So I would definitely tell children that a good way to break that down is to just talk about it, to bring it up to your closest friends, and you realize that you're not so isolated, and that I believe right now it's becoming a conversation that can be easily shared with a lot of people, although they probably won't go to the direct problems that they're going through, it's really easy to be like, oh yeah, school's really stressful, home life is really stressful, especially during COVID right now. I know a lot of people have to stay at home with maybe families that aren't super supportive, just depending on what they're going through in their life, and that can be really hard. So giving them resources as well. There's hotlines out there, websites. I think that's the best advice, a great way to break down these barriers.
I agree, and I think one of the biggest questions that we always have to ask is this: how do we break the stigma with seeing a counselor or seeing a therapist?
So I would say, I know it's stigmatized just because you feel like only people who are crazy go to see a therapist, but truthfully, many people do. A lot of people go just to talk to them as well, even if they don't have like suicidal problems or depression. So I think just letting them know, even though I personally haven't gone to therapy, I know that I have pushed people to go to therapy just because I think it's really important to talk to someone. And although you can talk to your friends, I don't think friends can give you the best advice when it comes to your psychological well being. So maybe if they really have problems, I would tell them that it's totally fine to go to a therapist, and maybe even offer to go with them. I probably can't go into the actual room with them, but I can bring them there so that they don't feel as afraid to do it. And I also know that, at least in college, there are free resources at Manoa. You can go for free because it's part of the payment that you have to do in the beginning. So I always tell my residents, like, I can go with you. And I have done that before. I brought them there, especially right now, there's telehealth. So depending on what your insurance is, maybe you can call your PCP and schedule some appointment with a therapist. So there's a lot of different things you don't have to go in person. You can go online, you can call, maybe you can even text. I'm not really sure about that, but basically just go because it'll help you a lot, I think.
One thing I think people, I didn't know, well, I also haven't personally gone, but one thing that I've heard and didn't know before was that you can shop around. You can make sure you find someone that really gets you or that you feel like you vibe with. You don't, of course, insurance like stand is an issue, but you are allowed to just try out different therapists. And pretty much just echoing what Geneva said, that you don't have to be in this crazy situation to have to go see a therapy. It's always going to be better to air things out, not let things bottle up in yourself. And like she said, talking to your friends can only do so much. Talking to your family can only do so much. A therapist they're trained for this. This is something that they are paid to do. That and although again, yeah, there is that stigma about it. People hear about it, but just remember that this is something that we're doing for ourselves. It's you're not doing it for other people. You're really doing it just so that you can get better. You can feel better. You can just talk. It really is something that's there for you and should be used more.
And the reason why I brought up that kind of question is because I know Geneva mentioned like for those that has a hard time talking with their family or friends, like there's other option as well, which is like being built now, which is the technology through telehealth, through counselors online and therapists and coaches that can actually like gives you that one-on-one conversation, and it doesn't have to be like I'm going into a mental health crisis, but if you are stuck, there's always that, like what you both mentioned and echoing, like there's always that support. Tying it back into our Filipino culture, how do you, what values did you guys grow up, and how did it shape your understanding of mental health and this idea of self care? And self care can be different in how we grew up to it. Kind of explain, but I guess to start it off, the values I grew up with especially how it shaped my understanding of mental health is that this value of takiki kasama, or just being together, and that always echoed with my family. Um, Even though my parents doesn't show it, like showing their feelings, it's their actions, it's their trying to always bring us together in the most non-verbal way, just the way that.
I think one thing that I think about with Filipino culture, for better or for worse, are resiliency. Always brought up in terms of like natural disasters that happen in the Philippines. But I guess even just growing up, just knowing that things will get better is kind of one of the things that I've been instilled with me. And just knowing that, kind of back to some what you were talking about, Chachie, that being together, having that support network, like that bayanihan and a spirit, I guess, that it exists. It did have an interesting effect with my mental health, just because then it kind of was instilled in me that, oh, things will get better. And it's almost a toxic optimism, where I guess it's like I didn't do anything to improve. I just assumed that things would get better. I didn't really kind of think about myself or what can I do. It really was this, I guess, almost trust in God, really, that things will get better, and to have this hope. And that really shaped a lot about on what like self-care even meant to me. I thought it really just was, I guess I didn't even have a good definition of self-care for a while, just really just going with the flow. And I still am like a very happy-go-lucky person. I do stay very optimistic, but now I think I'm more intentional about my self-care, rather than just taking like a lazy day. I still take lazy days, but I also just make an effort to do things that do make me happy, that do cheer me up. Whether that means like just eating, listening to music, taking a nap. But it really is just that the intentionality behind it has developed over the years. I do believe that self-care doesn't even mean like turning a negative to positive. Just even a negative to a neutral is enough. I think any improvement is good, and I'm happy that the roots of that did come from the Filipino culture, that we can get through it. I'm glad that I've had that mentality throughout my life. I just think the way I've approached it has changed.
So both what Chachi and Ryan said, I definitely have grown up with knowing resilience and knowing that you must stay motivated to achieve the things that you want to do. Depending on what you're trying to get to, it all just depends on how hard you work towards that. No one else can figure out what your future is going to be besides yourself. And definitely my parents are very religious as well, so a lot of a lot of the values that I have currently and growing up were really established around God. It was very God centered, along with family focused because of that. And then along with just being together with, like, it takes a village to raise a child. That kind of mentality was definitely keen on my childhood along with my adulthood. And I think that in a way, it has helped a lot with my mental well being as well. Because growing up, I don't think I had this definition of self care, because it wasn't really a word that people needed, I think, until right now. It's more like breaks. You take breaks when you need to take breaks. If you're hungry, go get food, like things like that. But with this fast paced world that we're in, it's almost frowned upon to do breaks. I know even in college, I would always hear my friends say, like, oh, I can't believe you can study for so long and all of these things. Like, wow, I wish I had as much stamina as you did. But then you realize that by doing all of this, by overworking yourself, you get burnt out much quickly. And so, just as Brian said, I think intentionality is really important. Knowing the difference between things that are urgent and things that are important, and trying to establish that into my routine has been something that have had a hard time with, but I'm currently learning and growing with. It's really important to, I think, to schedule things that I like doing in a week and then scheduling everything else that I have to do after that and around that, because above all, I can't help other people if I can't help myself. And if you just get so burnt out that you don't want to do anything anymore, that's not good for you. That's not good for the people you're working with. So it's really hard to do things if you don't care for yourself. So yeah, definitely it's been a really good thing that my family has instilled all these values into me, and I'm able to share that with other people, along with knowing how much I can push myself before I just collapse basically.
It's like family is our ultimate foundation in the very end. And I guess the transition with that is, how do you guys set your how do you guys set those boundaries of taking care of yourself and your family? It's kind of Geneva kind of touched upon it. I guess I can a little bit add on to it. I guess for me, how I set those boundaries of taking care of myself first is knowing when do I have space, and knowing when to better ground myself. Like how Geneva mentioned that um, it's so important to know that before you're giving to others and giving to those around you, it's better to look at yourself, doing a temporary check of where you're at first. And something that I just recently learned is that you can't give in your own cup, but you give when it's overflowing, so that the more when people give to you, you're giving from a cup that's overflowing. So you're not, like mentioned, like you're not burnt out, you're not like collapsing. And but I think recently, just I think this year has been a lot of learning how to better well set those boundaries, and being able to fully like have like that, um, not having too much pride, but letting yourself know that how much you do need to, uh, how much you do need. If you need to ask for help, then don't be afraid to do so, and learning how to just learn yourself. And I guess when family is that, knowing that sometimes family can be too much, um, but learning how you can learn their language as well, and learning that they grew up in a generation different from me, so accepting that um, we they're in different times and we're in different times, and it's being able to and really seeing where they're at for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think kind of one thing that I was touching upon earlier is that although, like, of course, we expect our parents to empathize with us, but we definitely do need to empathize with our families, need to meet them where they are at. Of course, they are their own responsibilities. But I think if once we come to terms with that, we can better think about ourselves, and just connecting that with breaking those boundaries between taking care of yourself and taking care of your family. I think if taking care of your family is your ultimate priority, like one thing that I do, I just think about, am I in the state where I can best help out my family? Like me being grumpy around the house is not going to benefit anybody. Like I need to make sure that I am in a better state. I need to I cheering myself up, but I just need to make sure that I'm in the best state I can to basically have an impact. I don't think like me being sad and forcing myself out there, forcing a smile on myself isn't going to help anybody. Um, if I'm not able to be productive, then how am I going to provide anything? So I think it really comes down to me making sure that I'm okay, so that then I can best help out others.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I had said last time, I can't help other people, I can't help myself. But with the boundary between my parents and I know that in the beginning of my college career, my parents would call me a lot since I'm an only child. So I initially wanted to go off into college. I wanted to step away from the islands for a little bit, but I know that because I'm an only child, my parents really wanted me to stay close. So that was a compromise with me and them that, okay, for undergrad, I'll stay in Oahu. And then for medical school, I'll go wherever I want. Is that okay? And then it was fine. So I'm like, I think it's not that I may have different parents than others. I know that some are more overbearing, but I know that it's a give and take. It's as I've grown older, I've realized that my parents are my parents, but they're also humans as well. Like they have feelings and whatnot. And if you just talk to them like how you talk to other people, you can get a lot done. I know definitely have to bring up points like these are the reasons why I want to do this thing. Please let me do it. But then also gets to a point where you become an adult, a more older adult, I guess, and you feel like you can just do whatever you want, but you can't really when you have Filipino parents or just Asian parents in general. They're kind of strict, so definitely just finding a compromise between the both of you, one where at least most of the points that you want to get through are met, helps a lot. And in life in general, you're not going to be able to do everything that you want to do. Like not not everyone's going to be your best friend. So I guess that just helps you with life after school. You'll realize that the real world is the same way as dealing with your parents, and that's what I've been seeing it as. But also with the pandemic, I realized that although I'm really busy, it's super important to touch base with your parents and your family, uh, because you don't know what's going to happen with you or them. Life's short, so if they want to barge into my room when I'm home, I think that's fine because I'm not gonna be living at home forever. It's gonna be something I'm gonna miss. So I think that's something that I've used to break down that boundary between us.
And just to like continue on with that conversation is how do we now bring that mental health into conversation with our families?
It's definitely hard. Like even though I mentioned earlier that I did that there was that one time I did call my parents, like that's honestly been probably one of the few times I've ever talked to my parents like that. I just different comfort levels, people feel differently between family members. Um, but I think it does start with just bringing it up, especially from a personal standpoint. Even if you don't want to bring it from a personal standpoint, maybe using people that your parents know, that your family knows, and normalizing it. I think even I guess to take an example from outside of mental health, like school, um, I know people who didn't go the traditional 4-year college route. Normalizing that with my family has made that conversation easier. Like they will ask about a person and I'll be like, oh yeah, they're doing this, they're doing that. And then that's kind of, even though that's the end of the conversation, at least that's a step towards normalizing that topic. So then going about mental health, just recognizing when things are stressful, when things are getting hard, and I don't want to say not making a big deal about it, but I guess in a way making it seem like something that is okay to talk about, right? Like it shouldn't be taboo. So let's act like it's not taboo. Is probably my biggest piece of advice there.
I think a big decider of being able to open that up with your family is starting off with small things, like joking around about things, just like asking like, "Oh, how's work? Uh, can you teach me how to make pin up a bit or something?" And then when you're doing that activity, start being like, I have this friend, and it may be you, or it may be your friend, whoever, and talking about what mental health problems your friend is having, and I feel like if you disassociate yourself a little bit from the conversation, you you realize your parents have a lot of advice in that field to bring up, and maybe even have mental health struggles themselves. And then you can be like, oh yeah, that friend's me, actually. If it's you, if it's your friend, you can just keep it as your friend. But that's a tactic I've told my friend to do. I personally have just gone out and said it, and that could work one of two ways. They may just disregard it, or they may not know what to say because they just think you're so resilient. And yeah, sometimes our parents just don't even know that there are these problems until you bring it up. And then they're like, oh, well, we can talk about it. So I think just talking about it really, or making it a more light-hearted conversation until it gets deeper, or just bringing up in different times, not just bombarding them initially with all this information, may help a lot. Just find the different ways that may help you. I know that some people can't just open up about it like face to face, so maybe you can text them a GIF and be like, yeah, I'm sad. There's a lot of ways, maybe, but just depending on how you are as a person, that's how you can bring it up to your parents. But because my parents and I, there's just the three of us, it's easy to just bring up things in a conversation while we're in a room watching the Filipino channel or something. If something melodramatic's going on, you can be like, yeah, that was me during finals. It's easy to do, I think. But for those that have a harder time with it, definitely pacing yourselves, taking some time to do it, that'll help a lot.
I think a lot of nice points that you guys made, especially like when it comes to just talking with our families, like a really big thing that you guys will bring up is like just having small talks, conversation, like what we're doing right now. Like doesn't even have to be like intense conversation, um like what I think Geneva brought up, or I think it was Brian, but in the idea that just talking to them like you would like an action, like your friend, and just know that they're, even though they're the people that brought us into this world, they're also the people that we can like lean on when things are tough. And I know like in other households, like it may not be like that way, like their family members or their mom or dad or anyone around them may not have that same connection or bond, and they kind of go into like, I know in our typical Filipino household, a lot of the parents or moms or dads that I see is that they resort into like drinking or other things. That's how they kind of um, feel their feelings or feed their feelings into. And I feel like if we as a children, if we are the one that take initiative to just make small talks, make conversation, and like what I think it was Geneva that said that just ask them how they're doing in their work without being too awkward. Just like joke around, like making joking sense of that. Yeah. One thing that I also wanted to kind of end off is, what are some best practices of giving yourself and those around you um, self love, self care, and controlling um, any anxiety that you may have been feeling this entire 2020?
I guess when I think about like self-care, self-love, controlling any kinds of feelings of anxiety, I, I kind of think I guess my life philosophy has been to gather as much life experience as I can. So I think that comes into play a lot when I like just make a mistake or there's some kind of failure in my life. I just mentally do the conversion that it's not a failure, it's not a mistake, it's something that I know now, something that I can take into the rest of my life. Even if it was, if not even a mistake, if it was just a bad day, if it was an argument, if it was just a bad experience, I can just now know that I have that in my toolkit. I know how to respond, or I know I have a better idea of what that even feels like, so I don't have to be afraid of it happening again. That's kind of a life philosophy thing that I've developed. Um, and then another thing that I've started doing to kind of prevent myself from really dwelling to my sadness is one thing that I've learned from like motivational interviewing. So really like I think it was brought up earlier, just like checking in with yourself, reflecting, and the motivational interviewing part of it comes in where one thing that I do is how did I feel about my day, or even the motivational part of it is like, oh, do I want to go out today? Do I want to see my friends? Do I want to work out? And then do a scale of like 1 to 10. And then ideally you don't say 1. If you say 1, that's another conversation. But if you say like 3, or if you say 4, then ask yourself, oh, why isn't it a 2? Why isn't it 3? And then you kind of pick up all the good parts of it. And you're like, oh, well, if I do exercise today, then I'll feel better later. Or if I go out with my friends, then I do like spending time with them. And then that kind of builds momentum into the positives of things. So that's definitely a tactic that I've kind of taken through different things in my life. And just with all of that, just doing things that I like, the time to do that. Kind of one great thing that Geneva brought up earlier was to schedule those things. And even what feels even better is scheduling those things and canceling something else. So just being ready to to something, just to take time to watch funny TikTok or to listen to music, things like that. So those are definitely my best practices for taking care of myself, making sure that I stay in a good place.
Actually, right by my bed here, I have a poster that says, "Do something today that your future self will thank you for." And that's been a mantra that I've had since like middle school, I think. Uh, but I think I realized that I kind of forgot about it when I went off to college because I didn't see it every day. But I think a big thing that I have done is that a good coping mechanism for me is to just laugh at things. This year I had a lot of things planned. Of course, we all did. Everyone has a lot of things planned, and it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. But I realized that with these opportunities that with these things that you've planned that fell through, there's many opportunities that will come up on the way. And so a big thing that I've been doing is I just let God take the wheel, and I just tell him like, whatever you want me to do, whoever you want to put into my life, I'm totally down for it. So even like this meeting up with Chachie and her asking me about this and me being like, I feel good about it. Yeah, I'll do this podcast, whatever. I've never done a podcast before. I've been doing a lot of things that I've never really seen myself doing, but just because there just seems to be more time to do it now, I've been like, yeah, I've never done that thing. Sure, why not? And meeting new friends, meeting new people, and having new experiences, like Brian said, I think the best way to get through life is to acquire as much experience as you can get. It's a good way to put yourself out there and to also help other people with things that they may have. So yeah, a big way to also help with my anxiety, or I guess anybody who's dealing with anxiety right now, is to realize that life's short. So just do the things you want to do. I think it's fine to have this timeline, but if not everything goes to plan, it doesn't mean it's never going to happen. It just means it won't happen the way you planned it. And that's totally fine, because there are other things that may never come up again, that may only come up now because your plans have shifted. And that's a big thing that I realized. Um, it was really hard to figure that out because I'm very meticulous with my time and have this set timeline and goal, but it's okay. Just go along with the ride, and I feel like at the end of it, you'll get to look back and be like, there are so many things I didn't know was going to happen, and it did. And I'm glad that I was spontaneous when I was younger and I got to do all these things. So yeah, I guess living a life you want to be able to tell your grandchildren about is a good thing to live by.
And I just thinking about all of this, I do want to just add, especially just like just watching Soul. I don't want to spoil anything, but I've been thinking a lot about my existence and my purpose and things like that. I think one thing that to take from a book that I just read by Ocean Vuong, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. There's a line that I probably gonna misquote, but in talking about like people's purposes in lives, one thing that they say is, so what if all we make of life is more life? So I think that's one thing that's been on my mind a lot. Just I think a big source of anxiety for people is this lack of purpose, and this like hunger for it. So I think another mantra I'm adopting is just to live, like just I guess just another way of saying gather all those life experiences, that it doesn't have to have this deeper purpose, that we can just live our lives.
I think that was really, both of you guys made a lot of great remarks. And I think when it comes to our very own existence itself, I think one thing that the question that ultimately continues to question us is what truly is our purpose? But the biggest answer to that is, what if our purpose is to just be kind and to have the empathy to create change in this world, and that is with us continuing what we were meant to do. This topic of mental health is always embedded in everything around us, whether it be school, work, anything. Mental health is always going to be here, and it's the idea that we need to address how it's not only about fixing mental health, but fixing what it needs to be changed. Because it's like this thing that I saw on Facebook. I think everyone saw it on Facebook, but health insurance is a mental health issue, but you can't help a client who can't afford to see me. Or like that kind of aspect, like mental health is always going to be here, but how are you going to fix the things that is causing that people worry? I hope that makes sense. But without further said and do, this is like the closing remarks, and this is where I ask, what could you guys take away from today's episode?
Well, there's so much to take away from today's episode. I think starting from the beginning of the questions, it's good to have a good establishment, to know that it's important to carry on what it's important to keep the values that have been instilled into us from our family and from our culture, because it really truly makes us a dependable person in our lives, and it's a great way to carry yourself. But also, don't be so hard on yourself. Understand that everybody is human as well. Everyone feels the same way that you feel, and life's too short to live with regrets, I guess, for just the time being. We don't know what tomorrow will bring, so it's really great to just do the things that you want to do, and to love the people you want to love, and tell your parents that you love and appreciate them whenever you can, along with your friends, uh, and get more experience. I totally forgot to say this, but if any of you have read Becoming by Michelle Obama, like that's a really good book. You should totally read it, and I feel like it has a lot to do with just fighting the stigma of where you come from and what you can do and will achieve. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really echo all of that, echo our whole conversation. But in general, I feel like a big thing is just we have to make sure that we're honest with ourselves, that we're checking in with ourselves, that we know what makes us happy, and that's the best way that we can make others happy. It and kind of what has been the last couple of points is that the best part of life is that we can live. So just making sure that we recognize that, and that anything can happen at any point. So might as well make sure that you're doing okay, and have a be happy with it, and do whatever you can to make sure that others are doing well as well. And we all kind of have a responsibility there. Check in with others, check in with yourself.
And last but not least, one thing that I will definitely take away is this conversation itself. This idea that was, I think, had to be brought up this entire conversation is this idea that uh, when it comes to just talking about things in our life, it's also being able to realize that it's okay to be not okay, and it's okay that when it comes to our families, that we have to treat them that we have to treat them that they are also people who live different generation, and we have to be patient with them and also with us, because we can't continuously trying to reach out to them if we ourselves is also not in the good mindset. It's like um, knowing how to better address what you need first before you try to reach out to them, because it may not be reciprocated the way we want it to be. And with that said, thank you to both for having this conversation. I really enjoyed talking with you guys, and being able to end this year with just talking to two different people and ending it with being able to have that sort of reflection of.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having
you
us.
so much. It was really great. And Happy New Year, everybody.